You've heard of dragon riders, you've heard of dragonborn. Have you ever heard of playable dragon characters? It's that time again. New season, new factions, new lore. Welcome to season 7, Days of Exploration. But how did we get here? Let's rewind back to last season. Season 6, Days of the Forgotten, had its ups and downs, but there were quite a few unexpected events. The season started with the pirates making a boisterous entry onto the Aetosian scene. King Captain Kailanov, the leader of the Great Crescent and the Crescentian Corsairs, met with King Drado and Taelar to discuss a contract to deal with the Zedan rebels. Taelar was wanting out of the Zedan rebellion, and the Zedans would not relent. And so King Drado sent for King Captain Kailanov, and they met and discussed the contract. Taelar would pay the Great Crescent about 30,000 Raykar per month. That is over $2 million US. Taelar just wanted out of the Zedan Isles and the pirates to stop raiding their own coasts, so they decided to kill two birds with one stone and sent the pirates to the Zedan Isles to fight each other. King Captain Kailanov agreed to this contract, and now the Zedans are fighting Crescentian Corsairs. So the Crescentian Corsairs set off for Zeuda and began their raids on the rebels, while the Taians pulled away their fleets and sent them to the east. This was no longer a war versus Taelar, it was a battle to survive. The pirates were ruthless. Their first battle came in the form of a 1v1 between Captain Eloquin and Admiral Jones. Eloquin's goal was to plunder the island as much as he could before Jones killed him. And so the two faced off and essentially had a duel, a 1v1 duel, where they ended up wounding each other. In that battle, Eloquin got a taste for the Zedan strength, and an idea was seeded in his mind. He wanted to ally with Zeuda, take the crown of the Crescent for himself, and return to pillaging the rich coasts of Taelar. While he was on Zeuda, Eloquin took a Zedan captive. The Zedan and Eloquin decided that the captive would play as a Taian sympathizer born in Zeuda, wanting to destroy the current Zedan leadership. The idea was to get Eloquin's ship out of the harbor of the other Corsair ships, side with Zeuda, and essentially attack the King Captain Kailanov's ship, the Bloody Maiden. This did not go as planned. While Eloquin and his Zedan captive were escaping, they went up right alongside of the Bloody Maiden without realizing, and Captain Kailanov's voice boomed over the ship. Eloquin was ordered onto the deck of King Captain Kailanov's ship, as well as the Zedan captive. Kailanov asked the captive many questions, and Eloquin did his best to stay silent. The plan was falling apart before his eyes, and he was afraid that he was going to be found out, and he had no idea what King Captain Kailanov was capable of if he found out that Eloquin was indeed a traitor. The Zedan captive offered King Kailanov information about where some Zedan supplies and arms depots were hidden throughout the Zedan Isles. King Captain Kailanov was suspicious, but he listened and took the captive to his own quarters. Eloquin was excused, ordered off the Bloody Maiden, and now this Zedan man was in the hands of King Captain Kailanov. After the man pointed out on a map where the supplies depots were, Captain Kailanov killed the man, and Eloquin was left on his ship alone. He was really not alone. In fact, he had his entire crew with him, and with him specifically was his second mate. Now, this second mate had gone onto the deck of King Captain Kailanov's ship with Eloquin and the Zedan captive. Eloquin thought he could trust his second mate, so told him about his complaints with King Captain Kailanov, but the second mate had ideas of his own. He wanted to betray Eloquin, but the opportunity didn't present itself. So when the second mate and Eloquin made it back to Eloquin's ship, the Gallico, the second mate betrayed Eloquin there. He pulled out his rapier, and the two fought on the deck of the Gallico. Eloquin bested the second mate, and the second mate died, but Eloquin was gravely wounded. He was taken from his ship back to the Bloody Maiden, where he was under the careful watch of King Captain Kailanov. As the Corsairs battled the Zedans and suspicions grew, Talar was now free to focus on its eastern fronts. First, they sent off a small force to deal with Imetarida. Imetarida and Droneland had been in a skirmish. Droneland was trying to invade Imetarida, and the Tans were not happy with that, but they did not have the forces to send to the Imetaridans to aid them. So all of this time, they just had to watch. But they were now able to send forces to help the Imetaridans and fight off the Dronelandi. That's not how it happened, though, and the Dronelandi are now marching towards the Imetaridan capital. But the bigger front and the battle to which most of the forces were sent was Chahar and the Tan land that they now controlled. As the Tans marched towards Chahar, General Demir Eren was called back to Sukra on familial matters. This had a big role to play in the upcoming battle. Without one of the vital commanders of the army there to help, the complete control of the military now fell upon the shoulders of the mad general, General Chashka. But the General Chashka, and even though he is called the Mad General, is legendary and very wise. So he was able to set up his forces and meet the Tan offensive when they eventually showed up. The Tans had one objective and one objective only. They wanted to eliminate the Chaharian artillery cannons as fast as possible. Once those fell, they would be able to take as much land as they wanted. The Tans ended up eliminating those Chaharian cannons and took the Valley of Tas. It was a massive victory for Talar. And now they were able to push into the Dominion Plain with the Dominion Tree on the horizon. Does this mean that there will be another battle at the Dominion Tree? I have no idea, but I kind of hope so. As Talar and Chahar warred in the north, Zeuda continued in its civil war. Rensos' conquest was going fairly well. He had most of the eastern states on his side, fully conquested and pledging their allegiance to him. But the largest and most powerful states still remained in his way. He wanted to conquer and unite all of the 11 Zeudan states, and without the largest and most powerful, this plan just would fall apart. Away in the north, Yárro had been in a civil war for quite some time. There was many different reasons for their fighting, but they were able to overcome it, install a new form of government, and peace seemed to be on the minds of everybody side of Yárro. Things were finally going their way, and the Yároans felt like they were finally making leaps and bounds in their pursuit of a glorious civilization full of half-breeds. In their prosperity, they found gold in the Shining Hills, and the Shining Hills border the river Lycos and the Zeudan state of Garamaskos. Garamaskos is under Rensos' new Zeuda, and the gold of the Shining Hills just called out to Rensos as loud as it possibly could. To accelerate his war, he needed money. He needed to feed his troops and make sure that he could conquer all of Zeuda, and the gold of the Shining Hills was his key to do that. Small battles began breaking out between the Zeudans and the local Yároans, and these battles eventually became larger scale, and Rensos sent a massive army to just brute force take the Shining Hills. In the west, the Meraxi had heard this news, and they were not happy about it. They did not want a continental war between Yárro and Zeuda. They held a council to decide what to do, and at that council, coincidentally, showed up the traveling party of Emetridans who had come down from the north seeking refuge from their own war. While they were at that council meeting, the Emetridans were asked, what should the Meraxi do? The orcs greatly honored and respected the Emetridans, and that is why they asked for their help. But their answer surprised the orcs. The Emetridans suggested that the orcs side with Yárro and fight against Zeuda to bring peace to southern Aetos. Not fully wishing to, but greatly desiring peace, the orcs decided to send many of their sentinels and troops to aid the Yároans in their battle against Zeuda. But despite the Great Alliance, the Zedans still took over the Shining Hills with their sheer numbers. Gold would now feed Rensos' civil war, and away in the north, a new civil war was sprouting roots. The Blue Exodus was on the rise in Del Anin. It was a small, quiet uprising, but it quickly gained a following. It was made up of mostly the youth of Lena Desapil, who were unhappy with the current High King Elowin and his decision to ally with the Chaharians against the Tayans. This group was led by Averin the Youthful, who is actually one of the players in my game. And their ideals were to get Delanin out of the war with Alan Hul and Taelar, and to end their unnecessary alliance with their northern neighbors Gendron and Jahar. The fateful night came for the Blue Exodus to attack the Delanin. They set out to take hold of specific buildings, military buildings, and governmental buildings in Lena Desapil, and they spread chaos all over the city. But in the end, they were held off, turning their coup into a rebellion. Following the theme of rebellions, Gendron was also in the midst of theirs, but Droneland and Des were also knocking on its door. The Dronelandi and the Des were now making their way for the city of Dorash, the capital of Gendron, after taking the city of Lorbag, one of the most influential cities on the Black Road. They were now only an 8 days march to the capital of Doraj. So now Chahar and Gendron and the rest of the world were looking on as the Northerners made their way into the first great stronghold of the south. But while Droneland was focused on their eastern wars, in the west they were also focused on exploration. King Adstrig had sent an expedition to the west. He and many of his advisors wanted to see what was really beyond the Aetosian waters. Did it go on forever? Did the world just drop off? Maybe the world wrapped around on the other side of Droneland. Maybe there was an unknown land beyond the known world. There were so many possibilities, and the Dronelandi had to know. So they sent off their ships, and after months of travel, they saw land on the horizon, and with it, dragons. And that began Season 7 Days of Exploration. With Season 7 comes 2 new factions, as well as 2 new races, the first of which are the Isles of Ice and its dragons. Dragons are one of the coolest races right now in Aetos. They are very strong, they're massive, they're sentient, they have their own language, their own culture. Dragons, I have never seen dragons portrayed in this exact way. I've seen Dragonborn, I've seen Dragon Riders, I've seen dragons like Smaug and Aragon and all of those different dragons, but I've never seen a dragon culture in this capacity. Now, there probably is something like this, but I've never seen people be able to play dragons as a faction, and now you can. There are 3 types of dragons. We have the king dragons. They are 4-legged, 2-winged, and they have a massive crown of horns above their skull. They have razor sharp claws, razor sharp teeth. Those two things are kind of spread across all dragons, but they are some of the largest of the dragons, hence the reason why they are called the king dragons. They are the ones who rule over the other species. The second type are wyverns. Wyverns have 2 legs and 2 wings, so it's just your classic wyvern. These wyverns typically have 2 horns protruding from their skull and resemble their king dragon relatives pretty closely. Now, the third type is called a Drachydradur. Now, Drachydraurs are kind of made up, kind of not. I just took a whole bunch of different ideas and melded them into one. It's like a hydra and a multi-headed dragon, just a lot of different things combined into one. So Drachydraurs usually have 2 to 9 heads and 2 to 6 wings, as well as 4 legs. These Drachydraurs, having multiple heads, are some of the most intelligent creatures in all of Aetos. The reason being that once the heads decide to unite, which is pretty frequently, they can just, 9 brains in one being. So they are some of the smartest and some of the most deadly beings in all of Aetos. Hundreds of years ago, the dragons came from mainland Aetos, actually, and they were once the tyrant rulers of Aetos. Long ago, there were the Dragon Wars, where the dwarves, elves, Emateridans, and dragons fought. The dwarves, elves, and Emateridans were on one side, the dragons on the other. Now, the dragons would have won, but Aetosian sympathizers, who were dragons, decided to turn against their own and end the wars. These who were now fleeing from Aetos became what is now the Isles of Ice, far in the northwest of Aetos. While the dragons breathe fire and live in ice, the Valach live in fire. Long ago, there was a dwarven exploration, and they were sent to the west to explore. This expedition was never heard from again. They were left for dead, but they weren't. They survived on the islands of Carai. Over hundreds, if not thousands of years, nobody really knows, they adapted to their surroundings. Dwarves were already seriously heat resistant, and this trait got brought out more. The islands of Carai are volcanic, extremely volcanic, and have a lot of hot gases. These dwarves had to adapt to that, so their heat resistance became accentuated, and they were able to live very close inside of volcanoes. Now, they can't be inside the lava, but they can be very close and live in that hot surroundings without really being affected that much. Over those thousands and hundreds of years, they forgot much of what their ancestors knew. They had one objective, and that was to survive. They could no longer build massive megastructures like their ancestors, though those things are coming to fruition once again as the Carai are becoming a stable civilization. They live in tribes and, like I said, have been bent on survival, but they are now discovering the outside world. What does that mean for Carai? I don't know, but they are discovering that they are no longer alone. Which faction will come out on top? Who will you root for? Let me know in the comments below. I really like hearing from you guys. If you want to be one of the legendary players I mentioned today, like Eloquin or Averin the Youthful, check out the links below to get started and rule Season 7 Days of Exploration. Until next time, peace.